Hello, this is Dr. Paul Cottrell. I'm going to be doing another update. This is November 15th. I'm going to be doing a critique of I-24 and Al Jazeera. So let's drop into I-24 right now. I'm also doing a simulcast on Spaces for X.
Welcome to this special broadcast on I-24 News. I'm Caleb Ben David. It is day 40 of Israel's war against Hamas. And the Battle of Al-Shifa Hospital, which sits atop the terror group's main command center in northern Gaza, has begun, with IDF troops today raiding one of the buildings on its campus and finding a weapons cache there. Now, the number of soldiers fallen in Gaza in battle now reaching 48. Rocket fire also continuing today from Gaza into Israel's south and from Lebanon into the country's north. More reports this evening of talks about a deal to free at least some of the 238 confirmed hostages held in Gaza as their families continue a march from Tel Aviv towards Jerusalem today, demanding their release. Well, Israeli special forces backed by additional troops entered Gaza City's Shifa Hospital overnight last night to carry out what they called a precise and targeted operation against Hamas terror infrastructure at the site. The IDF and officials in Gaza said there was no friction between troops and patients and medical staff there. While inside, the forces also delivered incubators for newborns, baby food, and medical supplies. And Middle East correspondent Ariel Osran has more in this report.
After much anticipation and buildup, IDF forces entered Gaza's Shifa hospital early Wednesday morning. A dramatic development in Israel's 40-day war with Hamas.
Based on intelligence information and an operational necessity, IDF forces are carrying out a precise and targeted operation against Hamas in a specified area in the Shifa hospital.
The limited raid began at 2 a.m. local time as dozens of IDF troops began searching inside the hospital, uncovering Hamas weapons, explosives, and assets, the army said. Prior to their entry, the forces came under fire and eliminated at least 5 terrorists. No soldiers were hurt.
The IDF forces include medical teams and Arabic speakers who have undergone specified training to prepare for this complex and sensitive environment, with the intent that no harm is caused to the civilians being used by Hamas as human shields.
Once inside Gaza's biggest hospital, the forces also delivered incubators for newborns, baby food, and medical supplies to the hospital. According to Gaza's Director General of Hospitals, not a single bullet was fired inside the hospital since the operation began.
We didn't know what to do within the building as well, within the building they are in. We can't move between the hospital buildings and so on. So we are with each other as with the patients, with the civilians within the hospital. It's totally scary situation.
Despite widespread fear from Hamas, some criticism could be heard from inside the hospital in recent days, even in an interview to Qatar's Al Jazeera TV.
We do have information that Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad uses some hospitals in the Gaza Strip, including the Al-Shifa hospital, as a way to conceal and support their military operations and hold hostages.
During a visit to the Zakim IDF training base near Gaza, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reiterated that Israeli forces will reach every Hamas operative in every corner of the Gaza Strip.
Do you remember when they said we wouldn't invade Gaza? We invaded. They said we wouldn't get to the outskirts of Gaza City, and we did. They said we wouldn't go into Shifa Hospital. We went in. It is in this spirit that we say something simple. There's no place in Gaza that we won't reach. There's no hideout, no shelter, no refuge for the Hamas murderers.
So as the IDF's ground operation deepens into Gaza's hospitals, it gets closer to its final goal of defeating Hamas. But as the situation in the hospitals continues to deteriorate, more challenging.
And let's go now to Israel's south, right on the Gaza border, and they're in the call if they're in Sderot. And Mary, it does look like that fighting taking place just a few kilometers from you over there in Gaza has entered a new phase centered around the Shifa hospital.
That's right. Good evening, Philip. So as Ariel mentioned in his report, fighting ongoing still in the areas around Al-Shifa hospital. The IDF, though, says it didn't fire shots inside the hospital, but that it did target a number of Hamas operatives, Hamas terrorists who attempted to open fire on them, and saying they eliminated 4 of those while they were working in the vicinity. The defense minister, Yoav Gallant, earlier today was also meeting with fighters who had recently been inside the Gaza Strip and reaffirming what the mission was to them, saying that the IDF in its Operation Gaza had 2 main goals. The first one is eliminating Hamas, no more and no less. But the second goal is also to release the hostages. This is one of the missions inside the hospital, try and see if they could find any evidence of hostages being held in that facility. So far, we haven't heard anything from the IDF on that front, but we do know that fight's ongoing. But here in the northern part of the Gaza Strip, we're also hearing intense battles taking place. Israeli airstrikes, of course, continuing in this part of the Gaza Strip, but especially also in the Beit Hanun area. We've heard a number of different fights taking place throughout the evening, including routinely continuous gun battles happening, some so close that we can even see from across the border those tracer bullets that are being fired by these heavy mechanized machine guns that are being fired by Israeli forces who continue to operate here. Today, the 14th Brigade of the Israeli military say that they also took over a Hamas outpost that was used to launch attacks against Israel. This saying that was part in the northern part of the Gaza Strip. We were unclear exactly where the outpost was located. They did not specify that, but we can tell you in the Beit Hanun, Jabalia area, we are definitely seeing intense airstrike continually targeting specific areas inside this area. We've also heard massive explosions coming from some of these heat-seeking missiles that Israeli warplanes have dropped from the skies ahead, likely trying to target some of those tunnels, which they say run all underneath the Gaza Strip. So we think that is what's currently going on here in the northern part of the Gaza Strip.
Right, and Mary, we should note, while all this is going on, there do continue to be rocket firings from Gaza into Israel, mainly in the southern part of Israel, that border area where you are.
That's right. Today, sirens again ringing out a number of different times. The most recent one was about an hour ago in the southern part of the Gaza Strip in the Sufa and Kisufim areas. We don't have any reports of injuries there. Important to note that these are evacuated communities, so we don't know how many people are actually living there. But many of the border communities, as they happen over the past month, continue to see relentless rocket fire and sirens ringing off inside their communities. In Ashkelon, a rocket fell inside that southern city. It did land in a road, though. We don't have any reports of injuries from that strike. But the IDF and the military, the government is calling on everybody to pay attention to the home front command restrictions, to stay in shelter when the rocket sirens ring out, and to try and stay as close as you can.
The subtitle that's going on I-24 that just came across, because this is a live feed here that they paused. Hamas agrees to Qatari mediated deal to release 50 hostages in exchange for a 3-day ceasefire prisoner release. Again, this war should not be conducted based on the hostages. If you can get the hostages back safely, that's bonus. But the mission needs to be to kill Hamas. And if this becomes a wider war conflict, then Hezbollah and Iran needs to be destroyed. It's that simple. Now, the three-day ceasefires, because the Israelis have the momentum and Hamas wants to break that momentum. It's just like having some sort of timeout in football to slow down your opponent as they're advancing down the field. No ceasefire, just keep on killing Hamas.
And to try and stay as close as you can to protected areas, especially here in these southern areas where your time to go to a shelter can be between 10 and 20 seconds. That's not a lot of time.
Not a lot of time at all. Stay safe down there, Mary. Thank you for that. There is some news out of the Israeli media this evening. I'm going to be very cautious with this because we have been very cautious at our 24 News on reports of hostage negotiations. Some of the channels here in Israel reporting this evening, citing sources saying there's been some kind of breakthrough in hostage negotiations, maybe the outline of a deal for staggered release of hostages during a pause or some kind of ceasefire. But we're going to be very cautious on that. We'll bring you any confirmed news that we have. A reminder that Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, the spokesperson, is scheduled to speak in the.
Okay, so I'm going to pause I-24 and I'm going to go into Al Jazeera right now because I want to make
the occupied West Bank. Marwan Bashar, who is Al Jazeera senior political analyst, joins us now, and I want to
1%
of humanitarian aid to Gaza. Okay.
As well. So progress being made, but the UN humanitarians, unlike the Security Council, have been very clear in that they need a ceasefire and a continuous flow of aid in order to meet the needs that are growing exponentially in Gaza.
Indeed. Thanks so much, Kristen. Kristen Salimi for us there at UN headquarters. Funerals have been held on the occupied West Bank for Palestinians killed in Israeli raids. The Israeli army killed at least 7 people in Tulkarem refugee camp on Tuesday. At least 196 Palestinians have been killed in the occupied West Bank since October the 7th. And Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas has once again denounced Israel and countries supporting its war on Gaza.
The unjust, aggressive war.
Now, just remember, this guy is living high on the hog in Qatar. His places, supposedly in Turkey, also. This guy is fleecing his people. All right, the Palestinian Authority president. All right, now what I think is telling. All right, and I'm going to do full screen on this one. It's not about the Palestinians. It's not about the West Bank. It's not about the Gaza Strip. What is right behind his head is the Dome of the Rock. And what did I tell you? What did I tell you? That this has nothing to do about refugees or a two-state solution. It has everything to do with that Temple Mount. And from a Jewish perspective, from a Jacob perspective, from the soul root of Jacob, from the children of Israel, that dome is coming down. Now, it's either going to be done peacefully or it's going to be done forcefully, but it's coming down. Now, these people like the Palestinian Authority president, Abbas, who's fleecing his own people and living like a king, has a big picture right behind him in his office, his version of the Oval Office, which is probably just square. The Dome of the Rock. And people keep on saying, Paul, this is not a religious war. No, this is not anything different this time around, even though rabbis 50 years ago warned that if you didn't get the job done then, that we would have where we're at now. Well, this picture proves my point. Mark my words. That dome is coming down.
The Palestinian existence and the national identity, the identity of the land and the identity of man. And it's an episode in the series of aggression that has continued for more than a century. It's also a disgrace on the foreheads of those who support this aggression and provide it with political and military cover. It's the remains of our children who are torn apart by the missiles of this Israeli aggression and the blood of our women.
Oh, the children, again, placating to the emotional fallacy that I've been expounding on for 3 or 4 videos now. And the bleeding heart liberal is going to go, oh, the baby's been killed. Oh, they don't mention how they desecrated the children when they invaded on October 7th. He doesn't bring up that he's living high on the hog in Qatar. I'm telling you, these people, the occupied West Bank, you know what? The Palestinians are going to have much after we fuck them up.
Whose hopes and lives are being assassinated by the missiles of the aggression army that will be a curse to the occupation and to those who stand behind it, or remain silent about the war crimes it commits against our people in the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and Jerusalem.
The war crime, Abbas, President Abbas, who fleeces his people, living high on the hog in Qatar. The war crime is you allowing Hamas to dig in. The war crime is you allowing Hamas to use the hospitals and having Hamas shoot out of the hospitals at the IDF. That's the war crime. But the international community, like Amnesty International, they have your back, though. Abbas, they have your back. I wonder why. Is there a kickback? Is there some pay-to-play type stuff going on? I don't know. But I do know this. That fucking dome is coming down. It's too bad that the Christians couldn't have done it properly during the Crusades.
Us from Ramallah in the occupied West Bank now, and as we heard Palestinian president denouncing Israel yet again, but what else did he have to say?
Well, those were very strong words from Mahmoud Abbas, some of the strongest he's said since October the 7th, because the Palestinian Prime Minister is under an enormous amount of pressure, and he's very unpopular amongst Palestinians in the occupied West Bank and in Gaza. The last polling was done, there's suggested 80% of Palestinians actually want him to resign, so he's under pressure to sort of take a tough stance to try and win some support. He's also met a couple of US diplomats who were in town today. He met Brett McGurk, who's a Middle East Affairs coordinator of the Security Council, and with Barbara Leaf, she's an Assistant Secretary of State. And he reiterated again to them as representatives of the US government that he wants them to put pressure on Israel to have a ceasefire in Gaza. And he also said that he wants an acceleration of humanitarian aid to Gaza.
Okay, thanks so much, Bernard. Bernard Smith for us in the occupied West Bank. Marwan Bashara, who is Al Jazeera senior political analyst, joins us now. And I want to first of all start with Al-Shifa Hospital, which has been, I guess, the main talking point there in Gaza today. Roughly 2,500 people are estimated to still be at the hospital. What happens to them now, or what should happen to them? Should they be moved south to relative safety, or should Israel, the Israeli forces, try and continue to allow the hospital to run, do you think?
No, it should be evacuated to a mass
It has become a war on hospitals. Al-Shifa Hospital is the epicenter of this war. And clearly...
that's because Hamas uses it as a headquarters or as a means of promoting their war effort and possibly holding the hostages. The Israelis are doing DNA checks on this. Can't take it anymore. These people are crazy. And why is it that every time that they have some sort of analyst or expert, they're not wearing a fucking tie? We need a little bit of professionalism these days.
The very outset. And clearly they are stuck now because the past so many hours, we haven't seen any evidence for all their claims, why in fact they are carrying the attack against hospitals in violations of international law. They're also stuck with the fact that they, all what they have now is in fact patients and doctors and nurses, and a couple of thousand people, my guess would be relatives and others just seeking shelter. It's probably easier to displace, quote unquote, to displace those taking shelter. But many of the sick in the hospitals, as the doctors have told us the past few days, are going to be very, very difficult to move. Some of them are on these complicated medical machines and so on and so forth, which makes their transfer impossible. But it's also not necessary. Why would you want to transfer anyone out of Shifa now? Especially that the Israelis are looking apparently in and within and under and above to see if there's any Hamas or trace of Hamas. As I said, there is apparently no such trace of Hamas. And it kind of boggles my mind why they always find few guns, right? I mean, why would Hamas take everything but leave the guns? Sounds like The Godfather, you know, take the cannoli, take the gun, leave the cannoli. I mean, I don't know why they would do that. But clearly they're not finding anything. And to my mind, when I saw the Israeli soldiers shipping those boxes into the hospital, saying that they are medical equipment, which again, I don't know why they would do that after bombing all these vicinities of all these hospitals. My prediction would be, knowing the Israelis, is that they're probably boxing in the evidence they want to manufacture.
That
they
is
want to
just
stage.
amazing. See, that again, Al Jazeera trying to concoct some sort of story, you know, that the Israelis are all bad. It's always the Israelis' fault. Always the Israelis' fault when it comes to Al Jazeera. Unbelievable, I'll tell you.
Now that they haven't found any evidence of anything, it basically now they're giving themselves the time to stage whatever they want to manufacture as a proof that there is some sort of a Hamas presence there.
The other big issue is the captives that Hamas is holding, and Israel said that they believe that some were being held in Al-Shifa hospital. That so far has proven not to be the case from what we can tell. What do you think is going to happen with the hostages, the captives being held by Hamas now, and how much pressure is on Netanyahu to try and find them anywhere else? Because as we've seen, there have been huge protests, especially by family members in Israel.
Absolutely. The pressure is definitely building up in Israel, as it is in the United States, for humanitarian pause in order to try and settle the issue of the captives. But clearly Netanyahu has taken the decision long ago, along with his war cabinet, to invoke the so-called Hannibal doctrine, an unwritten doctrine by the Israeli military, where they would sacrifice civilians and soldiers for the sake of national security. And hence the war and the invasion just went on unabated, because the issue of the captives is not their priority. Now, my guess is not that they have found that there are no such captives in the Shifa hospital. They're probably going to start looking south. And this is, I mean, we all need to start paying attention now, because they're already trying to empty parts of Khan Yunis in the south, which means now that they've been exposed for their lies in the north, they're going to start doubling down and copying what they did in the north in the south, starting with Khan Yunis, in order to look again for those tunnels and for those Hamas militants and for the captives, which means the continuation of the genocide now.
And the displacement of people. Where do they all go if you keep on bombing them and telling them to go somewhere and then keep bombing them when they get there?
Thank you for that, because, I mean, now we're talking about over 1 million people that have been shoved down south, and none of it was voluntarily, as they say. There was basically, you know, under fear of bombardment and all of that, pushed down south, under orders even. And now that
the Palestinians had 15 years to make sure that Hamas was not digging into their society. The Palestinians had it in their option set to decide to not have Hamas, to decide to have better self-governance. They didn't do that. And now other foreign countries have to come in and kick ass. Believe me, if what happened on October 7th happened across the border of Texas, all hell would break loose onto Mexico. And we, as Americans, wouldn't give a shit what the United Nations had to say. And nor should the Israelis.
And I start attacking the South.
Yeah.
It begs the question whether whether the Palestinian civilians now will be held hostages there, whether they will be pushed to the Sinai, the Egyptian territory, or, which I find it mind-boggling, to be pushed back to the north. Doesn't make sense.
No.
I think the Israelis are lost here. They're lost because all their assumptions have not worked out. All their tactics are not working out. Their end games is not clear at all. They're basically stuck. They have incredible firepower.
I think that the Israelis know exactly what they're doing, and they're destroying those tunnels, and they're hunting down Hamas. Will they be able to kill all of Hamas if they try to placate to the ultra-liberal and to the Westphalian geopolitics of the day? No. But if they go all-out war, they'll be able to knock out Hamas, knock out Hezbollah, and knock out Iran. See, the thing is that the people like him don't understand. The whole world is being judged on this. And if Israel just follows the tenets of the Torah and the movement towards a long-lasting peace, God's going to be on their side, and they're going to get the job done. Esau needs to die.
And indispensable support from the United States. But there's nothing they can do with all of that.
No. Okay, thanks so much. We'll have to leave it there, Marwan. We really do appreciate it. Marwan Bashar up there. Okay, well, there's plenty still ahead on Al Jazeera, including we hear from Palestinian refugees in Lebanon who are struggling to contact their friends.
Al Jazeera is funded in whole or in part by the Qatari government. And Abbas, the president of the Palestinians, seems to have a vacation home there. Now, you know, for a country that doesn't have a whole lot of money, how does he live like a billionaire? All right, we're going to drop back into I-24.
This person is scheduled to speak in the coming minutes. We'll get more information on what's going on in Gaza. With us in studio, we have our senior defense correspondent, Jonathan Regia, our senior diplomatic correspondent, Mo Alton, and our Middle East correspondent, Ariel. Also, and just another bit of news also, Jonathan, we're focused on northern Gaza, but some news coming out about southern Gaza, especially the Khan Yunis refugee camp or neighborhood, more accurately, in the south.
Yes, first we have to say that these are reports. There's no confirmation of anything that I'm about to say. It's all media reports. Those reports suggest that there have been leaflets dropped on the city of Khan Yunis, which is the second largest city in the Gaza Strip, but the largest city in the southern part of the Gaza Strip. And in those leaflets, people are told to leave their homes and go to designated areas where they could be safe. And that could possibly indicate the fact that the next stage of the ground operation, focusing this time on the southern Gaza Strip, may be about to begin. We've been expecting this, of course. If you want to topple Hamas, you don't just deal with one part of the Gaza Strip, you deal with the entire Gaza Strip. So this is a report that we're hearing. We can say that over the past 2-3 days or so, we're seeing much more activity from the air at the moment in artillery directed towards the area of Khan Yunis, again, the largest city in the southern part of the Gaza Strip. For speaking of Khan Yunis is the Palestinian city, which is just opposite to the community of Nir Oz. Nir Oz, a place where 74 people have been kidnapped for. That's about a third of the people kidnapped. The assumption is that those people are somewhere there. Is it true or not? Of course.
All right. As you were speaking, there's some new details. It looks like this confirmed about these leaflets.
The idea of confirming these leaflets were dropped over Khan Yunis and the eastern areas of Al-Karara, Jarrah, Ben Sohila, and Aisan. Now, this does raise the question, given that the residents of northern Gaza were called to go to southern Gaza, where they're supposed to go. I mean, there's some. There is the Western Mwasi humanitarian area. Here, they're called to go to designated shelters, but this does raise complications moving forward as the population of Khan Yunis and southern Gaza has doubled since the start of the ground invasion. This will make advancing and the next stage, if indeed we are to see, if and when to see a next stage in southern Gaza, that will be a lot different than what we're seeing.
We'll follow that, of course, but I want to go now to northern Israel, of course. Today is still those exchanges of fire between Hezbollah and other terrorist forces in South Lebanon. The IDF responding. Zach Anders, our correspondent, is up there by the Lebanese border. Give us the update on the north, Zach.
Well, this continues to be a broader area of conflict as Hezbollah continues to target Israeli forces on the Israeli side from the Lebanese side. Now, today was another red alert day for several communities throughout the border area, the northern Israeli border and the Galilee area. Kiryat Shimona once again put under red alert for possible intrusion through the airspace with these drones, the Iranian-supplied drones. But the IDF says what they were targeted with today were more of those ATGs, anti-tank guided missiles that were targeting their personnel on the Israeli side. They say they returned fire and fired at Hezbollah outposts in Lebanese territory. Again, this back and forth between both sides. The Israeli forces here are substantial. We've seen quite a number of troops in the area. The question, of course, is what is Hezbollah's willingness or full capacity for this engagement? How far do they want to go? And perhaps the propaganda or the social media that they've been able to cobble together from this is playing a part of it. They've been releasing a lot of videos, showing a lot of maps of.
If I was Netanyahu right now, I would stay on international TV and hit all the news networks. And I would state, Lebanon, you fire one more fucking rocket, just one more fucking rocket, and all hell is going to break loose. See, the thing is that we don't have leaders that actually say, you have 24 hours, get your shit together, or I'm going to fucking kill you.
Showing a lot of maps of Israeli targets that they've successfully struck, they say, and really pushing this idea that they are asserting their dominance here on the border line. Perhaps that is, for now, what they consider to be a fair level of their engagement, that's how they want.
This is why we have weak countries that kick the can down the road, that don't actually protect their borders. See, the northern front on Israel with Lebanon, they're lobbing rockets. And Israel's just supposed to stand there and just say, oh, okay, just let that happen. Thankfully, not many people have been killed, if any. And they're just supposed to retaliate. No, what you need is to seek and destroy Hezbollah. So if I was Netanyahu, I would be forceful. One more rocket, we go in and we take over. And we're going to carve out some of that land. And too bad if you don't like it, the Lebanese, because the Lebanese should have prevented Hezbollah from digging in, just like how the Palestinians should have prevented Hamas from digging in. We are at the place that we're at in this world because of weak leaders. Pacifying to the ultra-liberal. Give peace a chance. And they want to play John Lennon all fucking day.
their engagement, that's how they want to be involved. Of course, the IDF sources that we're speaking to are telling us their concern is that Hezbollah will, in the coming weeks, depending on what happens in Gaza, try and ramp things up, escalate the tensions here. Of course, no one knows for certain what's coming next.
All right, again, we'll wait for see maybe the IDF spokesperson Daniel Hagari will have more information also on the northern front. Zach Anders there in northern Israel near the Lebanon border. Thank you for that. Owen, again, and I'm being very cautious here, reports in the Israeli media claiming there's been some kind of breakthrough. We should know, yesterday, President Joe Biden, when he was stopped by a reporter saying, we're working on it, things are moving forward, and overnight a call between President Biden and Benjamin Netanyahu, which reportedly in part dealt with that. We should note that call coming on the eve of a hugely important meeting for President Biden with Xi Jinping, the president of China, in San Francisco today at this big Asian Pacific summit. So clearly that shows the importance, and maybe there is something to the reports of some movement in the hostage arena.
Yeah, as we look what I believe to be the skyline of the Gaza Strip yet again in with the nighttime here in Israel. Look, again, putting as fine a line as possible on the twin goals of Israel in this operation: the military victory in the war, and of course, returning the hostages. Khaled, what's different, and I understand the caution, what's different this time in terms of the feeling about the hostage deal is that the information is coming from Israeli sources, through Israeli media. This can't be seen as spin from the other side, if you will, from Qatar or from Egypt in some cases, or from Hamas directly. And we saw plenty of that, in which case,
Going to the foreign,
psychological warfare.
Going to the foreign networks.
Exactly. These are leaks coming from within Israel, and not for the first night, we should also say. And to me, that signals an interest by the decision makers and by the government to lay the groundwork for the public to accept a deal that's put out there, again, especially as there are leaks of the terms of the deal that's under negotiation, and to be at least able to feel out where the public is, even if it's not realistic, as we talked about last night, to have a full-on public debate over the deal. And also, given that the talks would seem to be close, to be able to deflect blame in case the talks break down, to be able to go to the hostages' families and to say, we tried.
Right, and some of those details, again, and all of this is based on media reports claiming there might be release of security prisoners, something that would be very unpopular here in Israel. And as you suggested last night, it's quite possible some of these details would be leaked out just to gauge the public reaction to them. Now, we're looking at those scenes there. That's the skies above the Gaza Strip. What you're looking at are flares there. Generally, that's an indication that there is fighting going on, ground fighting. We know there's reports, Jonathan, Al-Shifa Hospital, there were reports coming out.
I'm going to do an update on the market here. The Dow is up 175 as of this recording, and the S&P 500 is up about 13 points. The S&P 500 is trading at 4,500. It's following in line with what I was saying with the fib sequence that I said weeks ago. So, keep that in mind. President Xi is in San Francisco meeting with Biden soon. And because this is PNN, we have to go to commercial. So to help support my work, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and purchase the health products that I offer. If you follow my protocol, you're going to improve your health. You're going to boost up your immune system, and you're going to slow down aging. Get Health Max 35. It's a structural nano silver liquid. I take a teaspoon of it a day. If I'm feeling sick, I'll take a tablespoon or 2 tablespoons a day. But I take normally a teaspoon of this a day. It's a liquid. You swish it in your mouth, you gargle with it, and you swallow it. All right? And what that does is it neutralizes pathogens. Because we're going in the cold season, you need to get lozenges and drops. So I have honey lemon drops in 100 count. I also have them in blueberry in 100 count drops. And then I have the structural nano silver lozenges that are in the 20 count, which are larger. And I have them in sweet menthol and in green apple. So please go to the store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the health supplements to improve your immune system. Take turmeric. It's part of my anti-aging protocol. It brings down inflammation, and it's a very good antioxidant. When you bring down the inflammation, these pro-inflammatory cytokines, and you bring those down, your body isn't constantly inflamed and fighting an infection, right? You know, most of Americans, they're too inflamed, right? They have an inflamed body. You want to bring that down and calm that, so your body isn't constantly fighting something, right? And when you do that, when you bring down those pro-inflammatory cytokines, what happens when you take turmeric? Your body is healing. Your body is getting to the point where it's slowing the aging process. You'll actually notice that if you follow the protocol, after a year, between you and your peer group, same age, same type of basically lifestyle, and you use them as a control that they're not taking the protocol, you'll notice that you're aging slower and you'll be healthier. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the products that I offer. They work, and they're great for your health, and they're great for the holiday season as gifts to get people on track to a healthy lifestyle, because Hamas wants to kill you.
Reports coming out in some media about past couple hours saying that the Israeli army had pulled back from this at least one building in Shifa Hospital. And I think we have a graphic showing Shifa Hospital worth putting up. That we're not talking about one building here. It's a campus of buildings, and this is going to be an operation that certainly in Shifa is going to last several days. It's where even on the above ground, never mind the sort of below ground tunnels there.
It's a very large complex. There we can see it, and it's made up of a couple of buildings. Buildings originally built by the British when the British mandate was here, and then expanded actually by Israel some 30-something years ago. And then what we can see, it's quite a large complex. So Israeli forces, yes, they have entered one part and have looked through it. There are many other parts which the soldiers would also want to look through them. And let's remember, all that is above the ground. There's a level under the ground, and you don't know exactly what is waiting for you there. And are there terrorists just waiting for the soldiers to come in with explosives? We don't know all that. What we do know, what the army, what we're hearing is that there have been indications for some kind of a military headquarters there by Hamas, and we remember those graphics shown by IDF spokesman some 2 weeks ago, laying out the formation of that Hamas headquarters under the Shifa hospital. And yes, this is not an operation that will last a day or so. The Shifa hospital is a large complex. Taking care of all of it will take at least a few days.
All right, and speaking of also concerned there could be hostages, we don't know that in that area. And speaking of that, there was several events in Israel focusing on the plight of the hostages, including a march by family members from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Nicole Tzedek has been following this. Nicole, where are you right now, and what's the situation there?
We're in Beit Hashmonai right now. It's night 2 of this march for these families marching all the way from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, going straight to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office.
Like I said, the hostages should not be a deciding factor on how to conduct the war to root out Hamas. The ultra-liberal is buying into the emotional fallacy of the children dying and of the hostages and all this stuff. If you don't get the job done, I can't say this enough. If you don't get the job done, it's going to get far worse later down the road. Far worse. Let's just say you had a little tumor that could be removed and you'd be okay. Are you going to let it grow and metastasize to the point you're going to die? That's where Israel is at right now. They have a cancer called Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran, and they have to get rid of it. If they don't get rid of it, the patient's going to die. Netanyahu, because he has nothing to lose, because his political career is over, he needs to go all out and knock out Iran. Just push the button, done. Ayatollah gone.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office to take their concern, their despair, their heartache straight to Jerusalem and to the Israeli government, because for the past 40 days, they have been living, they say, in a never-ending nightmare. And so all they can do, they can't sleep, they can't eat, all they can do is keep marching, keep going forward, and continuing to be a voice. So behind me here, we've heard from different community members coming together, talking about their experience.
Let's just imagine they get what they want. A ceasefire and a de-escalation of the violence, and the hostages are, all of them are released, and they're all nice and well kept. And then 10 years later, there's not 240, there's 1,000 hostages and 10,000 Israelis killed in one invasion night. Was it worth it? Was it worth it? Or what if Hezbollah, Hamas, or Iran decides to release a biologic in Israel? Unbeknownst to the government, and tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of Israelis die. Was it worth it? Was it worth it? This is why you have to go in and kill Hamas.
Over the past 40 days, we heard different musical performances really bringing the community together. The event just wrapped up, but I can tell you at its height, there were dozens of people, even hundreds of people in this small community here in central Israel, all showing their support for the families. And that is one of the main requests that we're hearing from many of these family members as they make their march all the way from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. They say, we don't want to be alone right now. We feel like we have been abandoned by the Israeli government, and we cannot be abandoned by our Israeli citizens as well. And coming out here, seeing the community support.
Okay, I'm sorry, Nicole, we are going to the IDF spokesperson, Daniel Hagari, now.
IDF forces continue to go deeper in their operation in the northern Gaza Strip. At this stage, forces are cleaning the entire area from ammunition, from terrorists. IDF forces continue to act at this time in a precise way in the Shifa hospital. We entered this operation last night. Shifa is a place that we knew, based on intelligence, that has terror infrastructure, and we are deepening our activity. In the hospital, we found ammunition, intelligence, military intelligence, and military equipment. Also, we found a headquarters with communication means and technology belonging to Hamas. We have turned them into our intelligence forces. Our forces are continuing to look at the hospital based on intelligence in order to have more details, find out more means, and show the terror activity in the hospital. We had many contacts with the factors in the hospital to take away the people who were sick inside. We found Hamas uniform in the hospital thrown on the ground that belonged to Hamas people who wanted to flee as residents, as patients. We warned Hamas and we warned the hospital directors of our intentions. We also gave them food for patients and food for babies. The Rantisi Hospital and the Shifa Hospital all were used by the terrorists for their purposes, along with other hospitals. In Shifa and in Rantisi hospitals, what we found can tell us with no doubt that the hospitals were used for terrorism as opposed to the international law. We will continue to expose this to the world and show the way how Hamas ISIS takes hospitals and uses it for terror purposes. In the north, we continue to be ready on the defense and on the attack. Today we attacked Hezbollah infrastructures, and for every place there was striking on Israel, we attack back. In the home front, we have to continue to look to preserve the instructions because they save lives. Due to following the government decision, we're now supporting our servicemen and women, reservists who've been called for reserves. I call on all the reservists to hand in their forms. This is just one of the ways for us to show our appreciation for our reservists who left everything, their families, their work, their studies, in order to come and fight for our home. You are a beacon of hope, a beacon of appreciation. And we want to show our appreciation in a humble way through this fund that now exists. And together, we will win. The IDF is thankful for you. We advised families of 368 IDF soldiers who fell in fighting. We also advised the families of 239 hostages. We work all the time with the concealed and public means to bring back our hostages home. This is a national effort of the utmost importance. We have not missed and will not miss any opportunity to bring them home. We want to make sure that the families watching us know this. You are in front of our eyes all the time. Questions? Is it possible that the delay, the entrance to Shifa, is what caused us not to find intelligence about the hostages? We came into Shifa when it was the proper time for us. Also, we have to take into consideration the efforts that were made in front of the hospital. We have to understand there were many people, many more people than there are now in Shifa, which would endanger both our forces, endanger the people, and would give Hamas the one victory that they need. That victory is showing the IDF hurting civilians in hospitals. We want to do a high quality operation after a very precise information and preparedness. This is how we act, as opposed to the attempts of Hamas to delegitimize the state of Israel. This operation needs time. It needs time. It takes a lot of time, and there are many people there, patients, doctors, refugees, and we have to do it at the proper time, with intelligence, operational intelligence, according to our needs. Only by what we found now, we know that Hamas has conducted an operation within Shifa. This place after October 7th was used as a hideout for 200 Hamas terrorists who participated in the terrible slaughter. They went there. Today we came to Shifa. This is a symbol for them. Hamas leaders know that this is a symbol. They never thought that we would come to Shifa, and we will continue to go anywhere where there are Hamas terrorists.
All right, that was Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari discussing mainly the operations in Shifa Hospital. The main news out of that was Israel was finding other evidence besides weapons that Shifa Hospital was indeed, as has been said by Israel, the IDF for long used as a command center by Hamas, is Hamas's military wing. We'll have more on that and all the other stories when we come back. We're going out for a brief break. Back in 3 minutes. Stay with us on this special broadcast on day 40, Israel's war against Hamas.
While we're waiting for that, I'm going to go to a commercial for PNN. But before that, the markets are trading up today in the United States. The Dow's up 191 points, and the S&P 500 is up 15 points. And then the S&P 500 is trading at 4,511. The people followed my lead, and I told them to start being long on the S&P 500. You made some money, but if you don't want to pay attention to me, it's your own damn fault. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the deodorants that I've partnered up with Rainbow Herbals. We created these deodorants that are made out of citrus and peppermint and lavender scent. These deodorants not only can be used as a deodorant, but also they help to detoxify the body. The reason why they are such a potent and strong deodorant and help with detoxifying the body is because of the essential oils that are in them. They are at a certain harmonic. They come from the Himalayas, very high quality, extremely high quality. So go to the store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and purchase either the citrus deodorant or the peppermint and lavender deodorant. I think it's peppermint, tea tree, lavender deodorant. So very high quality, extremely high quality. So go to the store and get those deodorants. It's for male and female. It'll help improve your health. I know listening to Dr. Paul Cottrell may give you, sleepless nights because the world is going straight to hell. All right. But you can get your 3 REM cycles a night if you go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Good Night formula that is offered there. All right. This Good Night formula has tryptophan and melatonin in it, and it's going to allow you to get the 3 cycles of REM sleep. You're going to be well rested. You take this regularly, and what will happen is that your body will start to detox. Because if you get improper sleep, you're not detoxing. You're not detoxing your cells, and nor are you detoxing your brain. All right, your brain has to go through a detox too. It moves some of the junk into the CSF, and the CSF eventually gets filtered into the lymphatic system. All right, and that's how we get rid of toxins. But if you have improper sleep, you're going to have decline in mental capacity. You're going to have a decline in mental acuity. You're going to have a decline actually in mental health, right? So you want proper sleep. It's part of the protocol. Proper sleep, proper exercise, proper diet, proper supplementation, proper training your brain, reading, writing, talking to people. And stop watching Al Jazeera. And watch more PNN. So please go to the store and get the Good Night formula and add that to your protocol, your health protocol. It'll allow you to get into those 3 cycles of REM sleep, and you will have more energy and your body will be healthier. There are a lot of crazy liberals out there. They're trying to tell Netanyahu to do a ceasefire, and they smell. Don't be a smelly ultra liberal. Get my structural nano silver soap. It neutralizes pathogens like ultra liberals. And I have it in 5 different varieties. Please go to the store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the soap that you need to neutralize pathogens. It's a very high quality soap. It's made from structural nano silver, and it won't make you turn into an ultra liberal. So please go to the store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the products that will improve your health. This is PNN. We're going back to I-24.
Of what they sent in to Shifa today. We're talking about 3 incubators, 14 boxes of medical supplies, and 100 packages of baby formula. That's pretty much the opposite of what we just described that was found in the use of Hamas in the hospital. And of course, with the claims against Israel operating, at least under international humanitarian law, operating in the hospital, the presence of these materials, the fact that it's an operational headquarters, the fact that there are weapons there, does diminish the protection that the hospital gets under international law, and that obviously explains the ability of Israel to operate there, as well as the support that it is getting by the U.S. and the UK in such an operation. Obviously, this follows what was discovered in the Antisi hospital, which they're a children's hospital. There in the basement, they found evidence for hostages being held, including potentially baby hostages. That is not the case so far in the hospital. But 18 hours after the operation began, Israeli forces continue to operate in Shifa Hospital.
And the irony of seeing Israeli forces bringing metal equipment into Shifa, and then presumably will be taking out these tools that Hamas used to wage war from within that hospital complex. Well, we did report earlier that Prime Minister Netanyahu and U.S. President Joe Biden did speak by phone overnight. The topics including this IDF military operation in Gaza, and of course a possible hostage deal. Israeli media reporting there may be some advancement of that this evening. Now, in the opening weeks of the war, some American commentators did say that President Biden's support for Israel was hurting him by lowering his approval rating among certain wings of the Democratic Party. Since then, though, polling has painted a more complicated picture. But as our senior diplomatic correspondent Owen Alton reports, Biden has reason to believe the war will not be a big factor come the elections in November of next year.
The question is whether these pictures will matter. U.S. President Joe Biden embracing Israel in the war in Gaza in the fall of 2023, with the countdown clock set for the fall of 2024, and Biden's bid for re-election.
We will continue to have Israel's back as you work to defend your people. So we'll continue to work with you and partners across the region to prevent more tragedy to innocent civilians.
Claims about the impact of the war on Biden's election chances are likely exaggerated. The election is a year away. News cycles will have spun onward from the scenes in the Gaza Strip. And very few Americans have seen the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as a voting issue, focused instead on the economy, immigration, and the potential clash between Biden and Donald Trump. In pockets of the electorate, the war could matter. One that gets attention: Arab American voters in the swing state of Michigan, about 3% of the state's population, who in a close tally could swing the state away from Biden.
He continues to side on the wrong side of history and on the wrong side of humanity. And so I think come 2024, it will be very difficult for him to come to a mosque or come to a church where Arabs prayed and to ask for their support. I'm Israel.
Of course.
Now, let's be honest that the Palestinians come from the soul root of Ishmael and Esau. And Esau is a wild beast.
Of course, the war could well matter for Israel's standing among Americans in the long term. Polling is mixed on how Americans feel at this stage. And the war is not over. But a war this momentous is bound to have an impact. A lot is at stake.
Well, let's go now to our senior.
Before we go to the senior analyst, what does Dr. Paul Cottrell have to think about that? Well, thank you for asking me. We need to kill Hamas. We need to root out Hezbollah. We need to destroy Iran. It's very simple. And do you really think that the divine, you want to use the word God, it doesn't matter to me, but the divine gives a shit about a poll? Do you think he cares about the CNN poll? Do you think he cares about the Washington Post poll? Do you think he cares about the actual opinion of people? The majority of the people on this earth have moved away from the precepts of the Torah and the Bible. Instead of polling for some sort of opinion on how to conduct the war. What people really should do is start going, how can I be a better person and move towards the precepts of the Bible and the Torah so the world can be getting the blessing from above and have peace on this earth. The peace on this earth is not going to be through a ceasefire, and peace on this earth is not going to be through a poll, especially when it's heavily biased to the ultra-liberal, who actually wants to kill babies in the womb. 60 million babies have been killed from the 1960s onward. And we have ultra-liberals that want to put that in state constitutions to protect the killing of babies. Make it their right, the right to kill your baby. Ask not what your country can do for you, but how many babies can you kill in the womb? Ask any ultra-liberal, what actual civil liberty that's protected in the Constitution do you actually uphold? You uphold freedom of speech? No. Do you uphold the Second Amendment? No. Do you uphold the Fourth Amendment? No. Is there anything that the ultra-liberal upholds that is enshrined in the federal Constitution of the United States government, of our civil liberties, the Bill of Rights? No, they don't. You know why? Because they're ushering in something that is antithetical to freedom. And that is the problem. And that is why we have to kill Esau. Because there are people that come from that soul root. This is very biblical.
Well, senior U.S. correspondent Mike Wagenheim in New York, but yesterday they're in Washington for that rally. And of course, exceeding expectations, Mike. Close to 300,000 people, more than more than triple than the number of people that were expected. Just an impressive gathering all around.
No doubt whatsoever, and really with that, supposed growing chasm between American Jewry and Israel that we've touched on so many times, looking at, nearly 300,000 people on the mall, you would tend to think that in the moment of truth, so to speak, American Jewry really stepped up in its support of Israel. Now, after the rally, we headed over to Capitol Hill to cover a reception for the Congressional Israel Allied Caucus and spoke with a couple of members of the caucus, specifically Representative Brad Sherman, a Democrat from California, longtime member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Spoke with him just moments after Senate Democrats turned back a House-passed bill to provide $14.3 billion of emergency aid to Israel. The House, though, offset that aid with cuts to the Internal Revenue Service, the IRS. Senate Democrats said, we're not going for that. It's got to be a standalone provision. I asked Sherman specifically about that bill and whether Republicans had essentially poisoned the bipartisan landscape on emergency aid to Israel. Here's Representative Brad Sherman.
Once you start pitting Israel against domestic priorities, then the next bill is to cut local education to fund Israel. The next bill after that is to cut our food stamp program, which is the way we provide food to the poorest Americans. And the best way to undermine support for Israel in the United States is to say the only way to help Israel is to cut food for poor Americans, education for young Americans. We cannot pit Israel against anything.
Another member of the Israel Allies Caucus who spoke yesterday, Representative Chris Smith of New Jersey. He called Democrats' position on the Israeli funding a distraction. He said, we'll get it done no matter what on the Republican side, whether it involves offsets or not. Now, Smith, there's nobody who's served longer in the House than him. He's worked for decades on issues of anti-Semitism and the United Nations as well. He told us that the accountability for UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, the so-called Palestinian Refugee Agency, He says accountability for UNRWA is coming based on the fact that now so many things are being uncovered in Gaza in relation to UNRWA, and essentially they're hiding the Hamas crimes within Gaza. Here's Representative Chris Smith in our conversation with him yesterday.
Hatred and prejudice, UNRWA does it every single day. And the teachers, the textbooks, the study guides are replete with anti-Israel and anti-Semitic hatred. And we need to be absolutely clear.
It's not just anti-Israel and anti-Jewish rhetoric in these schools. It's anti-Christian. It's anti-American. It's anti-constitutionalism. It's anti-capitalism. This is the problem. The ultra-liberal, and there are a lot of ultra-liberals that are Jewish in the United States and in Israel, but the ultra-liberal is part of the problem. And they're so stupid that they're the useful idiot for the terrorists to help promote their means. And their means is to get rid of Israel and to have a caliphate. And the ultra-liberal will go, oh, the Palestinians, they're so peaceful. Hamas is so peaceful. Don't kill the children. Meanwhile, they're protesting in DC to be able to have abortions.
Be absolutely clear that we're not going to fund it. It needs to be changed. Otherwise, those kids, this is child abuse against Palestinian children. You know, it changes their mind and causes them to be haters. And the lies they feed them about the Israelis and about the Jews globally as well as in Israel, it's just outrageous.
And what about, and this is what I mean, it's all wrapped up in this ultra-liberalism. The confusing of the gender of the children, the confusing of the language that is permeating in the society now. You don't use the right pronoun in certain states and you might get a ticket. I played a video yesterday from a famous rabbi, extremely intelligent, all right? And he said, basically, don't be a goat. You know, it's not okay for you to think that you are something that you really are not. It's not okay that you just say, well, I identify as an elephant. I identify as whatever. No, it's not okay. And call him off on it. Instead of, and he said it much more cordially than I am going to, but it's not okay for these people to believe something that's not true. And it's the conservatives that need to push back and push back hard and say, that is not true. Your karyotype is XY. You're a fucking male. Oh, your karyotype is XX. You're a female. You don't like it? Talk. Take it up with God. But you shouldn't be writing policy in government, writing laws to get people to capitulate to what you want to believe, which is not true. And if you keep on going down this road, the slippery slope is all truth will be just whitewashed. All truth. All history. People need to wake up. It's a lot bigger problem than just an anti-Israeli, anti-Jew problem. It's an anti-Christian problem. It's an anti-civilization problem. It's an anti-truth problem.
So we need to fund it. We need to do it now.
Well, you're certainly going to find plenty of people in Israel and among its supporters who agree with that take on UNRWA. Mike, especially some of the stuff that's come out even over the past 6 weeks. I do want to ask you about the funding for Israel because the House did finally, or House Republicans did finally, at least within the House, pass the stopgap on this to keep the government going, to keep the government funded. The new House Speaker, by judges, managing to forge a compromise bipartisan between the Republicans and Democrats. Will that impact maybe in a more positive way efforts to get that Israel funding through, either as part of a general spending bill or even as isolated?
Well, at least buys him some time. And by the way, Mike Johnson compromise with Democrats probably means his days are numbered as the House Speaker, even though he was just installed a few weeks ago. But it does buy some time. The problem is the essential, what Democrats are saying, poison pill of IRS defunding within the Israel aid bill. And now it's up to the Senate, the Democratic-controlled Senate, to get something done. The Democrats in the Senate can pass their own aid bill, but then it will need to be reconciled with Republicans, and it will really put each side in a position where they can either toe their respective lines or force some compromise. But the ball is now in the court of the Senate.
Everything that's playing out is exactly proving my point. Israel needs to get the job done and stop dragging its feet. And stop depending on the United States so much. Yes, the United States is the yolk that is feeding this growing fetus that will usher in a new age. Some people call it a messianic age. And, the United States is going to be in a decline. But we are the energy source. We are the yolk for this new era, all right? But the thing is that in the meantime, in our contemporary time, the here and now, Israel can't drag its feet anymore. And it just needs to get the job done. And to get the job done means all war. All war. And it may also mean that the United States gets involved. But get the job done. Instead of 20 years of never-ending war in the Middle East and trillions of dollars and countless lives lost. Full war is good war. Half-hearted war is only kicking the can down the road. If you really want lasting peace, you got to go full out. Do you think if we did half war with the Nazis, that it would end well during World War II? No. It's crazy. It's crazy. And I just want to mention that because we're doing a simulcast with X, thank you for the ones that are listening on X through Spaces. I do appreciate it.
Ball is now in the court of the Senate. Democrats to pass something on Israel aid and then figure out if they can meet somewhere in the middle with Republicans in the House.
All right, Mike Wagenheim there in Washington. Thank you for that. Just staying on the subject of President Biden for a minute, Owen. He has got a big meeting today. I think I mentioned it briefly. Actually, it's supposed to start, I think, within the next hour in San Francisco at that Asia-Pacific Summit with Xi Jinping, the president of China. Of course, the main issues are going to be bilateral relations between the U.S. and China. The Taiwan issue may come up. But Israel and the Gaza conflict is expected also to be on that agenda there. It's still something no one would have expected 2 months ago.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be there, but at the end of the day, Glenn, you said it yourself, that this is a relationship with much, much bigger fish to fry, right? The most important bilateral relationship in the world. We all know how complicated it is. We all know how wide the range of topics is, how high the stakes are. I'm sure this will be there. How could it not if you're having a meeting of heads of state on November 15th, 2023? It just has to be there. But one would imagine this will not dominate the agenda.
What's the elephant in the room? And it's not peanuts. The elephant in the room is that the United States and the foreign direct investment, the IDF, or the FDI, I'm sorry, the FDI. The FDI, the foreign direct investment into China for the last 20 years has built up China to a point where they have built up their military and we may lose our hegemonic power in the Pacific. You know what that means? That means we lose the control in the positioning of the Pacific and the major routes to move goods through the Taiwan Straits. 50% of goods go through the Taiwan Straits. And oh, by the way, my grandfather during World War II fought in the Pacific Theater as a CB. And it was the CBs and the Marines and the Navy and the Air Force during World War II in the Pacific that made sure that we have the country we have today. If it wasn't for their sacrifice, we wouldn't have had the hegemonic power that we've enjoyed. And we're going to throw it all away. And we had Biden that was on the take and his son on the take selling America down the road. Now, the ones that are listening, either on Spaces, in a few days, or on YouTube, or on Rumble, or Bitchute, or Brighteon, I'm sure that you have a family member that served in the armed forces in the Pacific that helped make sure that we had that hegemonic power. But Biden is selling your family down the fucking road. So let's call a spade a spade. The United States government built up China, and we had leaders like Biden and others that were on the take.
I would imagine this will not dominate the agenda, that there are plenty of other issues that will do that.
All right. Now, of course, one of the issues that President Biden has been pushing has been for you want to call it a humanitarian pause or a brief ceasefire, however you would have it. The question is, how could that impact on military operations, especially when the IDF is in this sort of ongoing incursion into Al-Shifa Hospital? What would be the impact if, for example, you would have a cease in offensive operations for like 1 to 3 days, Jonathan, at this point?
Hamas currently is crushed, and if they have time, they could reorganize. It's that simple. They could reorganize, and they could put perhaps soldiers in jeopardy. We're only talking about what we're seeing on the ground, fighting we're seeing on the ground, but behind the scenes, a lot of things are happening. Communication, for example, communication lines by Hamas are at least in the northern part where Israel entered with ground forces, communication lines may be cut off, and this could give Hamas the time to reorganize everything, get their people some rest, get everything up and going, and of course get them a little bit more fresh to the battle. Generally speaking, this is something that Israel would not agree to, and when there were talks about a ceasefire for numbers of 10, maybe 15 hostages, the answer was loud and clear no. But when we're speaking of 70, 80, possibly 100 hostages, that of course is another issue, because these are very big numbers and there's pressure from families as well.
As we saw with that march to Jerusalem, which will be heading into Jerusalem, right to the Prime Minister's office, the reports put out by Hamas, for example, saying that Israel is turning down hostage exchange offers, accurate or not, do exert kind of political pressure on the Prime Minister.
If we're talking of numbers, say 80 hostages, I really don't see a government in Israel being able to say no.
Yeah.
The 5-day ceasefire, putting Israel on perhaps putting Israel backwards in the very good position it got militarily so far. But when we're speaking of 80 hostages, especially children, mothers, I don't see a government saying no. And let's remember one thing: we know that Hamas and they're masterminds in these kinds of negotiation. So they'll say, you know what, say 80 hostages and 5 days, but we'll release 15 hostages every day. But you know what? After day 1 and day
wrong argument. The war should not be conducted based on the well-being of the hostages. I know that sounds cold, but the bottom line is this. Let's use the same logic. Should we have had the boys down in Normandy back in D-Day, World War II, should we have stormed Normandy or should we have not, because the soldiers might have been killed? Sometimes to have lasting peace, you have to do sacrifice. And you got to get the job done. And it's going to be tough and it's going to be bloody, but it's going to be worth it because it's actually a better situation in the long run. And this is the same issue, placating to the ultra-liberal bleeding heart, emotional fallacy. And it's going to kick the can down the road and it's going to get worse.
Day. But you know what? After day 1 and day 2, maybe it's difficult to release another 15 hostages because we don't hold them. Hamas, it's the Islamic Jihad. We have to get them from Islamic Jihad. It's difficult for us. Then we don't need 5 days. Maybe we need 10 days. Maybe we need 20 days. It's going to be very difficult. We're speaking of 5 days. If it really happens, don't be surprised if it takes much, much more than 5 days.
Absolutely. Now, while we're focused right now on the battle ongoing in the Gaza Strip, Israel does face a number of additional threats on its borders. We mentioned.
I'll tell you, if Israel does a ceasefire for these hostages, you got a bunch of clowns running the show. Bunch of clowns running the show. And it's going to get worse. It's going to get worse. I know that sounds cold. I don't have any skin in the game, so it's easy for me to say. I understand that. You know, but the thing is that the reality of the situation is that this is going to get worse down the road. Seek and destroy Hamas. Just totally destroy them. There's going to be collateral damage. There's going to be a lot of death on both sides, primarily on the Palestinian side. But you know what? It's going to get a hell of a lot worse if we kick this can down the road for 10 years.
We mentioned the North earlier. Hezbollah may be the closest and dangerous of these enemies, but Yemen's Houthi rebels, Iran-backed Houthi rebels, have also demonstrated the capacity and intent to target Israel's southern cities with long-range missile attacks and drone attacks. Robert Swift takes a closer look at that.
Yemen's Houthis attacked Israel on Tuesday, targeting the southern city of Eilat with surface-to-surface missiles, not for the first time.
With the help of Allah the Almighty, our armed forces have launched ballistic missiles at various targets of the Israeli enemy in the occupied Palestinian territories, including targets in Eilat.
It has used drones and missiles to target Israel as an act of support to Hamas, with its weapons falling short and reportedly landing in Egypt and Jordan at times. A Shiite organization with Yemen's Houthi tribe at its core, it is backed and armed by Iran. For around it.
So it's just the Israelis being so uncaring to the Palestinians. Or is it that it's all about the Temple Mount? And you got all these crazy terrorists out there and Islamic jihadists all over the Middle East firing rockets at Israel. I'm telling you, it's all about a caliphate, and it's a battle between the caliphate and Western world. You know, do they want to have a Western world, a peaceful, prosperous world, or do you want to go back to barbaric times running under Sharia law?
And armed by Iran. For around a decade, it has fought for control of Yemen. It is designated as a terrorist organization in Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Malaysia, but not in the US, which temporarily labeled it as such for a month in 2021. On top of the threat of long-range attacks against Israeli cities, the Houthis are threatening Israeli shipping.
In the Red Sea, particularly in Bab el-Mandab and its adjacent Yemeni territorial waters,
Our eyes are constantly monitoring for Israeli ships, which rely on evasion and disguise in their movements, not daring to raise the Israeli flag.
The Houthis have form in attacking ships. Yemen's strategic location.
You know, and the problem that we have with our president of the United States, the one that doesn't have a brain, President Biden, he's not willing to make sure that Tomahawk missiles are being fired up the ass of these Yemenites. No, we can't do that because we have to placate to the AOC crowd. We have to placate to the ultra-liberal. We have to do a poll to see, should we fight against terrorism or not? How's that going to affect our general election stats? Instead of doing the right thing.
Offering them ample targets. In the past, they have struck Saudi Navy ships and commercial cargo vessels. For this reason, the US is deploying an aircraft carrier to the Red Sea, enhancing air defenses off Israel's south coast and beefing up deterrence. A move that could either dampen down the Houthi threat or risk tipping Israel's war into a wider regional conflict.
Let's come back to the Houthis in a minute, but there are some developments coming out, news, Ariel, some of it concerning the hostages as well.
Indeed. So just a short or earlier today, there were reports in recent days circulating that one of the hostages, the Israeli hostages, who was pregnant in advanced labor, advanced pregnancy, that she gave birth. So today we got the closest thing to an official confirmation. This is in a letter that Prime Minister Netanyahu's wife, Sarah Netanyahu, wrote to First Lady Jill Biden. Here we can see the letter on the screen now. I'll read just a part of it, the relevant part. She says, one of the kidnapped women was pregnant. She gave birth to her baby in Hamas captivity. You can only imagine, as I do, what must be going through that young mother's mind as she's being held with her newborn by these murderers. Now, up until this birth, 10-month-old Kfir was the youngest of the Israeli hostages held captive by Hamas. Now,
we're talking about an infant of less than a month, born in Hamas captivity, being held in Gaza. It sort of boggles the mind there, John.
And that could explain also the images of the baby formula and diapers that we saw in the.
But Islam is a peaceful religion. They care about the family. It is not a mistake that Al Jazeera's logo looks like a devil coming out of a fire.
We saw in the evidence that was exposed
at the Ramsey Hospital in the basement there, yes. And the Hamas apparently responding to some of this information that we heard Daniel Hagari and Gib doing his briefing, and some of it that the IDF is sending out.
Right, so we're talking about Hamas senior official Bassem Naim, who's obviously discrediting everything that Israel's claiming to have found in the Shifa hospital, saying that it's the IDF that brought the weapons and planted them there to try and show them as Hamas's, calling this.
It's always the Israelis' fault. It's always Jacob's fault. It's always Joshua's fault. It's always Moses' fault. It's always someone else's fault except the terrorists. DrPaulCottrell, if you were president of the United States, what would you do? I would actually make sure that the turban of the Ayatollah would go up in flames. How would you do that? Oh, easy. We have lots of weapons. Just drop them all.
calling this a farce, but I think the more interesting statement by this same Bassem Naim was given yesterday, where he basically admitted to the fact that Hamas has tunnels operating under the Shifa hospital, telling in an interview to Al Jazeera that there are resistance tunnels in Gaza, but the security of our people is important to us. The possibility of the presence of tunnels in hospitals does not justify the bombing of them. Israel targeted several hospitals, not just Shifa Hospital. It doesn't take a mind reader to understand from this statement that he's basically admitting to the existence of Hamas tunnels under the hospital, but according to him, that doesn't justify Israel operating in them. And so far, Israel has not targeted from the air any of the hospitals. All their operations are on the ground, mainly special forces, to try and reduce the friction and the casualties among the civilians in Gaza.
Just a quick word. I mean, Hamas might not be functioning militarily, but its media operation is very much functioning, and they are ready for this moment. They have answers for every step that the Israeli military takes. Of course, are they good answers to simply say that it's forged, right? That it's fake, that the weapons are brought there? Doesn't make a whole lot of sense, except the conspiracy theorists. But the media operation is there, it's functioning, and they're trying, from their perspective, to stay a step ahead. I'm actually fascinated by the media strategy.
This guy's bringing up a good point, and I want to go on a tangent. You have a lot of isolationists in the United States that are part of the problem that are not ultra-liberal. They're actually conservative, but they're isolationists. And by being an isolationist, you're not siding on good and evil. Which side are you on? All right. How are you you're either getting cursed or blessed. Pick a side. Being an isolationist is not gonna save you. All right. And that's part of the problem on why we've been kicking the can down the road. Well, we don't want to have, we just don't want to have any more war, blah, blah, blah. It costs too much, and all that. No, there's certain things you have to fight. A lot of the stuff we shouldn't be fighting. And we waste a lot of money on wars that we shouldn't have been doing. But this one is not something of our own doing. This is what God wants. Why? Because mankind has been fucking things up for so long. And it's time for us to actually start doing the entanglement. You know, this disentanglement that's been happening in society of good and evil. We have to untangle that all. We got to get the job done. We got to get the job done. And so what happens is that you have these conservatives that want to be isolationists. They try to justify their position. Some of them, not all of them, some of them, many of them, are conspiracy truther types, right? Giving a reason why not to go to war. But they're put into the same category in God's eyes. They're put in the same category of you're an ultra liberal, even though they're a conservative. They're in that same category. They're in the dark side or the light. Are you Ishmael? Are you Esau? Or are you Jacob? All right. Are you coming? What soul root do you have? All right. And these truthers that want to try to, dream up some sort of conspiracy theory on why this shouldn't happen. When you disinfect that with light, right, they start to realize that this is about the Temple Mount. This is not about Gaza Strip. This is about the rebuilding of the Messianic age. This is the rebooting of the temple and the blessing that comes down for all people. But you got these truthers, like David Icke, the dot connector. Everything, there's so many dots in the world that you connect anything. I'm not so sure, that David Icke is going to see the pearly gates.
media strategy in the Israeli side as well, right? Because the Israeli military, Daniel Hagari's office, has clearly made a calculation that, notwithstanding the statement, notwithstanding the video that the international spokesperson Jonathan Kudrikis has put out, they seem to want to wait until the end of the operation to be able to come with a finished package, right, to international media and give the full picture with the best information possible that they have to make the strongest possible impression. I would imagine that they are extremely disappointed with the impact of the video from the Rantisi hospital. I certainly am, and to say quite surprised about how little impact that made.
I'm a little surprised by your surprise, I have to say, Owen, considering certainly the attitude much of the international media has already taken. I'm not sure why you necessarily would think the reaction would be more than you would expect from them.
The IDF has proof that Hamas was using hospitals. And the international community, like the BBC and Al Jazeera, don't want to really say that because you have too many bleeding heart liberals playing the emotional fallacy game and not willing to get the job done. There's not one goddamn thing that a ultra liberal has done that is positive for mankind. Not one.
Be more than you would expect from them.
I guess you're right at this stage, but I still can't help but be struck by the difference in the level of quote unquote independent verification required for materials supplied by the Israeli military versus those supplied by the Ministry of Health. It just doesn't make sense. But it does, I wonder whether the spokesperson's unit, Khaled, is drawing lessons from that and trying at the second and even more important bite of the apple at Shifa to be able to present the fullest and best evidence at the end of the operation with only these very small lower stakes, right? Lower stakes drips and drabs along the way.
Well, I mean, you could argue that the main audience for the information that was put about at Rantisi Hospital was not for the public or international media, but for world leaders. In other words, as Israel was about to go into Shifa Hospital, it did not want the pressure to ramp up from the United States, from Western nations, from the European Union, and the idea was to bring out that information from Rantisi. So at least at this stage, Israel would be able to go ahead and carry out these operations in Shifa Hospital. And that degree, you have to say yes, because it has been able to go. It started into going into Shifa Hospital without at least statements like the ones we heard from earlier from Emmanuel Macron.
Yeah, listen, I mean, maybe you're right. I would hope that the ambition, there would be a little bit more, the goals would be a bit more ambitious than that. Right, if you're putting this video out through the international media, that would actually be for them and for public opinion, which of course is playing such an important role beyond the issue of world leaders, and also the fact that was much more meaningful, right, in giving legitimacy and space to the operation in Shifa Hospital didn't come from the podium and from Daniel Hagari or from his video. It came from the podium in Washington and from John Kirby, who came out and said the United States shares Israel's impression. That was something that Western media, and especially American media, couldn't fully ignore, couldn't ask for, for all kinds of independent verification of, and could simply take the word of American intelligence.
Okay, but that the reaction from John Kirby could have been a result of the presentations.
He said it was from their own intelligence.
Okay, yeah, okay. We could let's move on from that, and let's move on to the internet, the regional reaction to some of the events taking place right now.
This is PNN, and we have to go to a commercial break. Now, I know there are an awful lot of people in the United States that have poor lipid profiles. They have low HDL and high LDL. You need to go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get omega-3. You need to improve your lipid profile. By improving your lipid profile, what's going to happen is it's going to reduce cardiovascular disease. So get omega-3 and improve your heart health. And if you follow what I've been saying, you can actually shrink plaque buildup. On many of the videos I've explained on how to do that. Take lignans. It's a powder. It improves your immune system. And by doing that, you're going to have, by having a healthier immune system, you're going to be able to seek and destroy cancer cells. If you have a bad immune system, a poor immune system, an unhealthy immune system, there's a tendency to have more cancer. So to seek and destroy cancer, boost up your immune system. Take lignans, it'll help boost up your immune system and help with hormonal health for males and females. Get that Hamas out of your body. Silver gel. This gel is in a dispenser, and it's 35 ppm. I think it's 35 ppm, and it's great because of this dispenser. It's portable. You throw it in your bag. Again, you use this to neutralize pathogens, especially during the cold season. And it's a skincare product. You can put it on your skin, leave it on it, at night, and exfoliate it in the morning, and you'll notice that your skin is starting to turn healthier and tighter. It'll work even better if you take it with my collagen and vitamin C and drink 64 ounces of purified water, filtered water. No fluoride. Fluoride makes you stupid. It makes you a terrorist, right? Fluoride, it makes you stupid. So no fluoride in your water. So take the silver gel as a way to neutralize pathogens and improve your skin. And follow the protocol for the skin health. You need magnesium and zinc daily. If you're sick, take a double dose of this. It'll help to boost up your immune system. Oh, by the way, if you help to boost up your immune system, you'll be able to fight pathogens better and cancer better. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and also make sure you subscribe to all my channels. I have 3 YouTube channels. Links are in the description of this video. I have Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. Links are in the description of this video. Make sure that you subscribe and click the notifications. And share the videos. Tell your friends and your social networks to subscribe to the channels. And I would greatly appreciate it. I know you don't agree with me on everything. That's okay. It's okay. To get to the truth, sometimes you have to be a contrarian. It's okay.
Some of the events taking place right now in Gaza. Among them, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who since October 7th has returned to the virulent anti-Israel rhetoric that he used before shifting tack to reestablishing relations with Jerusalem last year. But today in Ankara, Erdogan took his anti-Israel rhetoric to a new level, or you could say a new low. Here is some of that.
Israel! Hey, Israel, you have an atom bomb, a nuclear bomb, and you are threatening with this. We know this, and your time of death is coming. No matter whether you own a nuclear bomb, own whatever you own, but you are a goner.
I think the significance here with Turkey.
And Turkey's part of the NATO. Everything I've been saying, if the Western world, especially the Christian part of that Western world, doesn't side with Israel and the Jews, we are going to fail. And we're not going to be able to fight and defeat the caliphate. They attack the Jew and the Israeli, and then it's going to be the Christian. Then it's going to be Western society. Then everyone's living under Sharia law. And I wonder how the ultra-liberal, blue-haired dumbass in New York is going to feel when the terrorists start throwing all the homosexuals out the window, like Anderson Cooper.
I think the significance here with Turkey is that it is one of those countries that has relations, that has been involved in the Gaza issue. One might have think they could have played a constructive role in the so-called day after, but clearly Erdogan has made a decision not to be part of that, and to shift back to really joining the sort of axis of rejectionism that Israel has been facing with countries like Syria, for example, and Iran.
Right, Caleb. Erdogan has gone all in terms of putting his chips on the Palestinian side. Obviously, this is not the first time this has happened, but that was also the cause for the break in relations.
I would even say on the Hamas side, not even necessarily on the Palestinian side.
Indeed. I will say that Prime Minister Netanyahu has responded, obviously refuting the claim, saying that he's not going to take any such attacks from a leader who bombs villages inside Turkey as part of his so-called war on terror. But following the resumption of diplomatic ties between Israel and Turkey, this was always a possibility. This, I would imagine, was in the back of mind.
Terrorist leaders and the Palestinian leadership live high on the hog in Qatar and in Turkey. Just keep that in mind.
Would imagine was in the back of minds of Israeli leaders when they decided to renew ties. But given the strategic nature of Turkey in terms of its positioning, in terms of its ties with both axes, the Iranian axis as well as the moderate axis in the Middle East, it's a country that it could be beneficial if there isn't a flare-up in Gaza. Unfortunately, this flare-up in Gaza once again exposed Erdogan's true colors, and I think moving forward it is deemed necessary to give a more strategic, long-term view as to what Israel-Turkey relations should be moving forward.
I'd say the prospects of Israel building a natural gas pipeline through Turkey have diminished certainly greatly. Gentlemen, stay with us. We are going out for a brief break, but we will be back with another hour of our special coverage of Israel's war against Hamas in day 40. We'll be back at the top of the hour. Stay with us.
Okay, so that is my second broadcast for the day, and simul broadcasted with X on Spaces. So the ones on Spaces, thank you very much for listening. I appreciate it. In further episodes, I might open it up for people to comment. I'm not sure yet, but probably I will, but not today. But thank you for listening. And for the ones that are viewing this on YouTube, Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble, thank you for watching. Please make sure that you go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the health supplements that I offer and follow my protocol. It works, it slows down aging, and it boosts up your immune system. And you're going to need that as we move through, tumultuous times. All right, so take my advice, go to the store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Link is in the description of this video and all my videos, and purchase the products. Please help support my news coverage by donating. You can donate on the website through Stripe or PayPal. It's on the home page at the very bottom, or you can donate through Buy Me a Coffee. The link is in the description of my videos. Or you can be a paying member for my Patreon channel. That way, all my content is supported and it can be free. I put nothing behind a paywall, nothing. Everything I've done has been free to the public. All right. So go to the store, buy the products, and please help support by sharing the links, telling your friends to subscribe, to grow the channel so I can reach a larger audience, to be able to stop the crazy train that is happening in this world. Thank you for listening, and have a nice day.